It's not the house that's haunted. It's your son.
What's your favorite scary movie?
What's the boogeyman?
As a matter of fact, it was.
Yo, what's going on, everyone? How are you doing today? I'm MJ, the host of Slashes and Sync, and I'm happy to be with you on this Tuesday morning. Now, Marvelous will not be joining me on today's episode. We just, I'll be real with you, lost track of time this weekend. Things got a little too crazy, so I ended up recording an episode on my own and was able to get it edited and uploaded for today. But Marvelous and I will be back, and next week we'll be covering Ari Aster versus Jordan Peele. Director versus director, modern day horror directors. So that should be a pretty fun discussion. We also started Hatchet 3. I've already seen it. She hasn't though. So once we finish that, we'll probably also get a review of Hatchet 3 out. That way we can move on to Victor Crowley, because I have not seen the time skip film, the film that doesn't feature the characters from the past movies. So I'm interested in watching that and seeing how Victor Crowley is, in a film that is still a part of the continuity, but during a time skip, and I get to see maybe the kills there, because I like the kills in Hatchet, man. They're one of my favorite kills in a horror franchise, I should say, probably, besides maybe Terrifier. But I've made it a point to say over and over that I don't like to judge Hatchet based off of Terrifier just because of the fact that they're both gory films. They're also very different films too. But as you guys saw on the title, we're going to be talking about Reddit horror stories. Going to take a break from movies and TV shows and just, I don't know, man, just kind of give off some audiobook vibes type shit, just kind of see what you guys think and just do some narrations of some scary stories that I found on Reddit. Probably not going to do too many, probably like 2 or 3 at most, because I believe the second one I pulled up is actually pretty long. So reading this plus giving my thoughts on it throughout of this should take a minute. Thankfully, the first one that I pulled up isn't too long. But again, I'm not just going to be narrating. I'm going to be giving my thoughts and feedback as I read this through, and basically just kind of treat this as a story and my reaction to it, so you guys can also listen to me narrate, but then also hear my own thoughts on it as well. Now, Reddit is pretty known for having these horror stories. In fact, they've become pretty popular, with a lot of people taking some of the more famous ones that have been uploaded over the years and putting them on TikTok. And people have made videos or essay styles or even like docus, or even using AI as a fact to like paint out the picture of what's happening in those stories. And they've been pretty creepy, man. I believe one of them is like the wife who is like creeping up on you or like staring at you. That's been used by quite a few creators on TikTok. I've seen that video like quite a few times, and that's one of the ones I have pulled up because it is supposedly one of the scariest stories on No Sleep. So I can't wait to get into that. But the first one that I have pulled up is from Grace Omega, and the title is There's Something in My House. So let me get one quick drink of water and then we'll get into the story. All right, I am back. So let's go ahead and start this, man. I recently moved into a big house, actually sort of a mansion, just temporarily. It's kind of a complicated situation. The house belongs to a family member. They were going to be gone for a few months, that type of thing. I was going to be there on my own, so obviously I thought, what if it's haunted? Now, if you have to think that, I'm just gonna say it. I'm just saying it probably is. If you have to think that, if that's even like a thought in your head, most likely something's probably there. But let's continue. There wasn't anything in the house when I moved. There is now. I was in the main hallway unpacking some stuff when the doorbell rang. That put me on the edge right away, because the house is at the end of a long drive and kind of out of the way. You have to go looking for it. There was an old woman at the door, or sort of old. It was kind of hard to tell. This was in broad daylight, but there was still something kind of off about her. She was really tall, like a full head taller than me. And there was something weird about the way she looked. It was like none of her clothes fit her properly. She shook my hand and smiled, really wide, and told me that she was from the neighborhood council or something like that, and asked if she could come in and talk to me. My gut reaction was to say no, but I couldn't really think of a reason to. She was just an old woman. What was she going to do? I really wish I had just slammed the door in her face. Now, I tend to think I'm an asshole a lot of the times. For the people who are friends of mine and who are listening to this, I mean in the sense that if I know you, I'm probably one of the nicest people in the world. But if I don't know you, I will slam the door in people's face. I will shoot the finger in the parking lot. Like, there's a ton of things I will do. I get pretty fed up pretty easily, and I get annoyed very easily. At least when it comes to people that I don't know. And that's kind of a bad habit. I shouldn't have that because, there's probably some people who are just probably having the best day of their life and they make one mistake in the parking lot and then I'm just like, fuck you. So it's like, it's not, the nicest thing. So I probably should change that. But I'll say this. If I feel like something is off and you're at my door and you're asking to come in and I do not know you, I just moved in, you're not coming into this house. Let me tell you that much for sure. I brought her into the living room and she sort of tottered behind me. Like her feet didn't fit into her shoes properly. She sat down without asking and grinned at me until I took a seat across from her. For about half a minute, she didn't say anything, just smiled and stared at me while I got increasingly awkward. Just as I was about to break the silence, she fished in her pocket and pulled out this really big old-fashioned sweet, the type that comes in see-through wrapping. Here, she said, eat this. Now again, I'm just gonna say, if you've never met a person before and they're offering you food and you already have a bad feeling about them, don't eat that. Whatever you do, don't eat it. If you want, take it, put it in your pocket, you're gonna eat it later. When she leaves, throw it away. Get rid of it. But anyways, let's get back into it. I should probably point out here that she spoke really quietly, so it was difficult to hear anything she said. I accepted the sweet, kind of taken aback, and unwrapped it. It was dark red, almost black. I popped it in my mouth because she was still grinning at me and nodding her head. Have you ever walked around behind a supermarket where they keep the big bins? They throw meat that's gone off in those. Picture that rancid smell, but on a hot summer day. It's so thick, you can almost feel it in the air. That's what the sweet tasted like. I almost spit it out onto the floor, but social niceties made me chew the thing and force it down my throat. The woman was talking all the time, but between the taste and her quiet voice, I barely heard her. My mouth tasted like rotten meat. So I politely told her I was going to go get some water and ran into the kitchen. When I came back, she was gone. I had been in the kitchen for less than 30 seconds. Hell nah. Hell nah. This sounds supernatural, so this probably wouldn't change anything, but I know, you know what I mean? If this was me and I just moved in, I would still go change the locks, bro. Front door, back door, whatever, locks are getting changed immediately. Immediately. Just for extra peace of mind. I don't think it's going to help in this situation because, again, this entity sounds supernatural. So, yeah, but I would change the locks. Anyways, my first reaction probably should have been to assume that she went to the bathroom or had to leave in a hurry. Instead, I searched the entire house. I went through every single room, convinced I was going to open a closet or look under a bed and see her stuffed in there, grinning at me. That didn't happen, obviously, but I was still extremely on edge. As the sun started to go down, I felt like I was turning off the light in my bedroom. after spotting a giant spider in there. That night, I popped a chair against my bedroom door because I couldn't shake the feeling that the woman was still in the house somewhere, hiding. I woke up at around half two or 2:30 in the morning. I woke up at around half two in the morning. I'll just read the way it is. I woke up at around half two in the morning and heard creaking floorboards downstairs. It was an old house and unfamiliar. I kept telling myself that until the noises stopped. When I woke up the next morning, Nah, bro. Okay. When I woke up the next morning, there was a red sweet on the living room table. Nah, bro. Nah. I'll tell you the same thing I told the police. No, I couldn't be absolutely certain that the sweet wasn't there the day before. Maybe I had just overlooked it. But I didn't think so. They told me that the organization that the woman claimed to come from didn't actually exist and clearly thought I was wasting their time. After they left, I searched the entire house again and the grounds. Then I searched them again. By the time I was finished, I had managed to calm down a bit and looked at the situation rationally. The woman probably left the suite there the previous day, and I just didn't notice. I had searched the whole house twice now. There was nowhere she could possibly be hiding. She was probably just some doddery old lady who wandered off while I was in the kitchen. As I prepared to go to bed, I had managed to fully delude myself into thinking nothing strange was going on. I decided not to do anything childish like blocking my door, because what was I even afraid of? If she somehow was still inside the house somewhere, what was she even going to do? I mean, I've seen some horror movies out there, man, where some of these older people got that freakish strength, like I don't know, man. I mean, again, I would still change the locks, bro. I mean, I think this thing is supernatural, but I would still change the locks, man. Maybe, get the blicky on the side, get a knife. Walmart sells them. Do something. That's all I'm saying. At some point in the middle of the night, I woke up abruptly, knowing in the back of my mind that something was wrong. I guess I must have heard something in my sleep. I turned over onto my side and reached out to turn on the bedside lamp, groping around because I was in an unfamiliar room. When the light came on, I saw the old woman standing right next to my bed. Fuck that. Fuck that. Fuck all of that. When the light came on, I saw the old woman standing right next to my bed. All right. I only got a glimpse of her because as soon as I screamed, she scuttled backward out the door, really fast. I only got the briefest glimpse of her before she vanished into the unlit hallway outside my door. I now believe that the human brain has a special compartment for dealing with experiences for outside the realm of the natural. If I had woken up to find a burglar in my room, I probably wouldn't have gone numb with panic. If there was a lion at the foot of my bed, I'd be too paralyzed with fear to do anything. But as soon as I saw the woman was gone. I jumped out of bed and slammed the door shut, then shoved the chair up against the handle. Then I dashed from my phone. No signal, no internet. I later found out that there was nothing wrong with the phone or the local service. I think she was interfering with it somehow. You think she was interfering with it? Bruh, come on. Come on, bro. Maybe I watched too many horror movies. I don't know. The drop from the bedroom window wasn't too high. If I landed just right, I'd probably avoid an injury. But what if I sprained an ankle or broke my leg? I had a sudden vision of pulling myself across the dark garden while the woman sprinted after me, and I decided I didn't want to risk it. That gave me two options: wait out the night in my bedroom, or try to get out of the house now. I went for the second one. I had an idea of my flimsy barricade wouldn't hold if the woman decided she wanted to barge in. And I mean, yeah, it depends on the type of door and chair, but more often than not, especially if it's a supernatural entity, I don't think a chair is gonna hold up, but I used my phone for light as I slowly, quietly crept along the upstairs hallway and down the stairs. The light barely traced the shapes of the walls and the dark, yawning flames of open doorways. I jumped at every single shadow and undefinable, unidentifiable shape, certain that any second that grinning face would appear out the shadows. I got downstairs and to the front door. I had double locked it and put the chain in place. Just as I was reaching for the first lock, I heard a rapid, uneven footsteps at the top of the stairs, approaching swiftly. I undid the first lock. A high-pitched shriek, oh brother, a high-pitched shriek came from the hallway down the stairs, and I screamed as I undid the second lock and wrenched the door open. It stuck fast. I had forgotten the chain. I glanced behind me and saw the tall, spindly woman half running, half falling down the stairs toward me. Her head lowing or elbowing backward and her mouth hanging open. I'm picturing that, and that's fucking terrifying. Like the idea of like it just not running fast, but also like tripping over itself, like that is. I think I've only seen that I think that's like a rarity in that I've seen in horror films when it comes to, because I notice most horror films like to do the like walking on your hands now. I've seen that as a common thing. From what I read, that's also like a common entity that people see as sleep paralysis demons. So I can see why I guess Hollywood and or directors have marketed that to use to scare people. But yeah, as far as like tumbling over yourself, like that, like that's scary. Like I freak out. I can't even remember getting the chain off. I might actually have just yanked the door open so hard I broke it. In any case, the last I saw of the woman was her face, inches away from me as I slammed the door shut. So that house is going on the market. Or I mean, if she wants it, she can have it. She can take it. I'll go back and live with my parents or something. I don't know. I sprinted to the nearest house and eventually they called the police. Possibly because I was half delirious with fear and just talking incoherently. The police once again failed to find anything unusual. It's been a week. I'm staying at a friend's place, sleeping with the lights on and the bedroom door barricaded. The house's real owners aren't back yet. I'm not sure what I'm going to tell them, but I have to stop them from going back there somehow. This isn't a haunting. It's an infestation. I can't stop thinking about all the holes in our defenses, the windows and the doors left open, the strangers invited into our living rooms. I just hope to God it's the house she wanted and not me. Man, that's a kind of a bar there at the end. I mean, I like that. That was pretty good. I could actually see this being like some sort of like Blumhouse film, nothing like too crazy. A lot of it being like dialogue heavy, mainly with like the big stuff happening at the end. I can definitely see that. But overall, I mean, I don't know if this is real. I know some of the stories on here are real. I know some of them have been repeated so many times that they're just urban legends at this point. So it just depends. But I mean, nah, man, this shit's crazy. But I give this like a solid like 8 out of 10. This was a good read. Let me know what you think about it. And by the way, Grace Omega is the one who posted it in the No Sleep Reddit. So if you want to go look for it yourself and read it, in case y'all didn't like my narration, y'all can go check it out for yourselves. But overall, pretty good. So the second one is actually a more famous telling. As I mentioned before, multiple people have talked about it to me. I've seen different sort of interpretations and adaptations of it on TikTok with certain creators. And even just on Reddit itself, it's very popular. Most people see it as one of the most terrifying things they've ever read. So this should be interesting. It's from Malia Girl 1314. The title is "My Wife Has Been Peeking at Me from Around the Corners and Behind Furniture. It's gone from weird to terrifying." Uh-huh. I don't know about this one. Because, like, it's long as fuck. Like it's really long as fuck. Alright. I mean, we'll try and get through it. My wife Lynn and I have been together for 6 years and married for 11 months. Our entire history together has been very normal, and never once have I noticed any weird behaviors or red flags. I can't stress enough how out of character this whole thing is for her. I mean, I've heard about that. Like, story aside, I've heard about, like, being together with somebody for a long time and then getting married, and things are pretty different, especially if you've been together with them for like more than like 3 or 4 years. Because most people, at least from where I'm from, tend to get married within like 8 months to 2 years of dating. Like, being together any longer than like even a year is kind of crazy, and then being together longer than 2 years is even like a rarity. So I have heard about that happening with couples. But Lynn is very kind, intelligent, and thoughtful. She's always been the no nonsense type of person. Being childish or trying to scare me is not something she normally do. She doesn't even like watching horror movies. When we first started dating, she agreed to watch The Shining with me because she knew how much I loved horror. She was so scared that she didn't even make it through half of the movie before we had to turn it off. She isn't into anything creepy and has never been into pranks. It's just not her cup of tea. And that's fine. But that's what was so strange about this. It's just so unlike her. I should also add that she never had any mental health issues, and as far as I'm aware, it doesn't run in her family. I know some people are able to hide their mental health problems, but in the 6 years we've been together, I think I have some sort of sign. Two months ago, I was in the kitchen making myself some coffee before work. I was running a bit late that morning, and I knew I wouldn't be able to make it to Dunkin' Donuts for my usual morning fix. I took a sip of my coffee as I hurried down the hall towards the front door, when I happened to notice Lynn peeking at me from around the corner ahead of me. I could only see her eyes and a strand of her long dark hair hanging against the wall. The rest of her body was concealed behind the corner. I nearly spilled my coffee when I saw her. I did burn the shit out of my lips though. Alright, now that's kind of crazy. Like, I'm like one strand of hair hanging against the wall, brother. Just the eyes too. Like, I'm like, what's the lighting situation like in that house, bro? Like, all right. Geez, Lynn, I said, wiping a few drops of coffee from my pants. You scared the shit out of me. She immediately popped out of view like a little kid that had been caught. I heard her scurry off towards the living room, and by the time I got to the door, she was out of sight. It was really weird, and just totally out of character for her, like I said. But I also found it kind of funny that she was being more playful and a little less serious. I shouted that I loved her and called her a weirdo. As I shut the door behind me, I heard her laughing. I mean, probably what I would do too in that situation. But, I mean, her behavior was a bit odd, but it certainly wasn't something to call a priest over. I forgot about it by lunch, and by the time I got home, she was her normal self. I didn't bring it up, and neither did she. And just life went on. The next incident happened 3 days later. It was around 2 a.m., and I had woken up to get a drink. I was standing at the kitchen island, jug of OJ in hand, when I felt a strong feeling that I was being watched. For whatever reason, I looked down at the floor and saw my wife's smiling face staring back. She was peeking at... Okay, what? From the floor, bro? She was peeking at me from the other side of the island, staring up at me with wide, unblinking eyes and grinning. Grinning like the Cheshire cat. I on the floor, bro? What the fuck? Alright. Alright. I screamed. I'll admit it. Not out of irritation, but fear. For some reason at that moment, I was legitimately scared. At the sound of my scream, Lynn scuttled backwards out of my view, her hands and her feet smacking the tile floor as she hurried out of the kitchen on all fours. That's fucking crazy. Like, nah, bro. Divorce papers immediately. Anyways, I didn't run after her or even yell after her. I just stood there frozen in shock, wondering what the fuck had possessed her to do that. And it's funny too, because this guy likes horror, so it's kind of interesting that he's not like trying to prank her back. Who knows? Who knows? It took me a little longer than I like to admit to go back upstairs, but I eventually did. When I got to our bedroom, Lynn was lying on her side, asleep, or at least pretending to be. I stood there for a while, watching her breathing to be sure she was really asleep. I had the feeling she might jump out at me the moment I got into bed, but she didn't. I climbed into bed and she didn't even move. Her breathing was soft and deep, and I was starting to wonder if I had dreamt the whole thing. Probably not, brother. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt there. Anyways, the next morning I waited for her to come down for coffee, and after handing her a mug and kissing her cheek, I decided to ask her about it. What was that about last night? I asked, keeping my tone light so I didn't offend or embarrass her. She frowned over her cup of coffee, shaking her head like she had no clue what I was referring to. You were peeking at me again. From over there, I said, pointing to the spot on the floor by the kitchen island. She followed my gaze, and when she looked back at me, she burst out laughing. She laughed so hard that I couldn't help but join her. You creep me the fuck out sometimes, you know that? I said. She giggled and set her cup on the counter and wrapped her arms around my neck. You creep me out all the time, so I guess we're even, she teased. We said our goodbyes and left for work. As I drove thinking about how creepy it had been seeing her grinning at me from behind the island like that. The sounds her hands made on the floor as she crawled away. See, that's what's scary to me, is that she didn't even just like you got Like, you got caught. Like, if this is a real person, you got caught. You're going to get up, maybe even take a sip of that OJ, and then go upstairs. She walked on all fours, bruh. On all fours. Like, get the fuck out of here. I told myself she was just trying to be silly. Just trying to join me in on my love of all things. Horror. It's not like I was afraid of her, but it still didn't sit right with me. I started seeing her peeking at me more and more. Sometimes she'd be peeking out from behind the couch or living room curtains. Once she even managed to get inside her grandmother's old trunk that sits at the foot of our bed. Fuck that. I'm sitting on the trunk and you're gonna stay in there for a little while. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. Anyways, I might not have even known she was there at all had the trunk's old hinges not given her away. She'd had the lid popped up just enough so that only half of her face peeked through. She'd been grinning like an excited toddler. It was unnerving. I didn't even know what to say to her. All I could do was stare. When I finally found my voice, I asked her why on earth was she doing this. She didn't answer, but she had slowly closed the lid, shutting herself inside the trunk. I just walked away feeling disturbed. Motherfucker, I'm disturbed, and I'm reading this shit. What the hell? Alright. I'm mixing the narration voice with my reactions a little bit too much. I'm going to try and separate that. My bad on that. I didn't understand why she was doing it, but it clearly made her happy. I just hoped she would tire of the game quickly. Lynn didn't peek at me for the next 2 weeks. I started to think she was done with her weird prank, and I was relieved. We were watching a show on Netflix one night, and I jokingly said that I had seen her peeking at me lately, and that she must have given up on her spy game. She looked at me with a smile and said, "Maybe I've just gotten better at it." Fuck that. Again, divorce papers twice. I'm taking your shit now too. Fuck that. Maybe I've just gotten better at it? Hell nah, bruh. Hell nah. I didn't say anything, but I wondered whether or not she was joking. For the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about what she'd said. Was she still peeking at me when I wasn't looking, and I just hadn't noticed? And if so, what the hell was she getting out of this? I started to feel paranoid, constantly checking whether she was watching me from around the corner or behind a door. I was jumpy whenever I was home, and she wasn't even in full view. Of me. I felt stupid and crazy. I mean, I feel crazy too, dog. I'm with you on this, bro. I'm with you. Anyways, but after a few weeks without another incident, I began to relax. I stopped checking behind furniture, walls, and told myself it was just a bad memory. Then a few days ago, things got so much worse. Lynn left to go to a friend's, and I lounged on the couch and played a couple games on my laptop. Around 9 p.m., I hopped in the shower, and as I was washing the soap from my hair, I felt that awful feeling that I was being watched. I slowly opened my eyes and almost had a fucking heart attack. Lynn was peeking from behind the shower curtain, her entire head stretched into the shower, leaving just her body outside. Her long, dark hair hung against the curtain, the ends dripping with water. Her mouth hung open in a terrible grin. Eyes are wide and red, as if she hadn't blinked in a while. I screamed and jumped back against the wall. She didn't move, nor did her smile waver. Her makeup ran down her cheeks in two black streaks. She looked giddy and completely deranged. I was fucking terrified. I'm terrified too. I'm envisioning this shit. This is insane. No normal person does this. And listen, when you've been dating a woman for a long time, you know how important their hair is. And when it comes to how many times they need to wash it and take care of it, ain't nobody just gonna get their hair wet like that, bruh. Oh my god. That's not even the proper way to remove makeup either. Anyways, I'm gonna stop. Anyways. We stood like that for a few moments, neither of us saying a word. After what felt like forever, she slowly pulled her head back out the shower, and I watched her blurry figure through the curtain as she moved backwards towards the bathroom door. A second later, the bathroom door slammed shut, hard enough to rattle the mirror. I screamed again and jumped out of the shower to lock the door. I stayed inside the bathroom for over an hour. Maybe I overreacted to some of you, but joke or not, I wasn't going to put up with this crazy shit anymore. That's what I kept telling myself as I paced in my bathroom, stopping to listen at the door every few minutes. I'm with you, bro. If you want out of this, man, get out of it. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. Suddenly, I heard a muffled sound, and I pressed my ear against the bathroom door, straining to listen. I couldn't hear anything, but I envisioned Lynn standing on the other side of the door, giggling at her own joke. I felt a surge of anger. I was beyond pissed at being made to feel scared in my own house and made to hide in the bathroom for an hour. All for what? Some joke? If it was a joke, it was an awful one. What the fuck, Lynn? I snapped. This shit is getting really fucking annoying. I waited for her to apologize or to call me a jerk, but instead I heard a faint moan. So quiet I wondered if I heard it all. And then just complete silence. Lynn? I called out, not being able to hide the shakiness in my voice. I got no response. just my own heavy breathing. I swear to God, just fucking stop it, I yelled, pounding my fist on the door. I waited for her to cuss me out, something I would expect from talking to her like that. I've never screamed at her before. But there was nothing, just the occasional drip from the shower head. I won't deny that I was scared, too afraid to open the damn door and face my own wife. I waited another 30 minutes or so, which feels like a fucking lifetime when you're scared. Finally, I decided I wasn't going to spend the night hiding in my bathroom. So I got down on my knees, peered under the door. I almost expected to see her face peeking back at me, but thankfully I didn't. I could see straight down the hallway to the top of the stairs, but no Lynn. I didn't know if I should be happy about that or not. I looked for a few minutes, waiting to see her head pop up over the top step, but it never came. I stood up, my hand hovering over the door, and I mentally prepared myself to open it. I slowly turned the lock, with shaky fingers, and I was about to yank it open when I heard a sound that still makes me feel nauseous when I think about it. A moan, louder than before, but this time I was able to tell just where it was coming from. I turned my head to the closet door as if in slow motion and locked eyes with my wife, who was peeking out at me from the slight gap. Fuck that, bro. That's insane. Like, I'm actually wondering if she's possessed or like if she's actually pulling a prank, because I can't imagine it getting to this point to where he's banging on doors and cussing her out. That like, I, I mean, shit. I want to continue this. I know it's kind of late for me, but I want to continue this. Her eyes were still wide as ever, and her mouth was hanging open in the most grotesque, gaping smile I'd ever seen. I didn't even scream. I was too scared for even that. Her hands were clasped to her chest, body trembling with sheer delight, as if she could barely contain her excitement. A short, raspy moan bubbled up from her throat, deep and raw, sending a shiver through my entire body. Somehow I found the ability to pull the bathroom door open and ran as fast as I could all the way down the steps, snagging my keys and phone from the table in the living room before running outside of my car. I could hear her shrill laughter behind me, but I didn't hear her getting closer. I didn't bother shutting the front door. I drove away from the house faster than I legally should have, shivering the entire time, either from fear or the cold, maybe a little bit of both. I hadn't grabbed a coat or even a pair of shoes. I was still in my boxers and my hair was still damp. I drove straight to my brother Chris's house, about 40 minutes away, ignoring any and every call and text I got. I didn't check my phone until I was parked in my brother's driveway. Lynn had called 4 times and sent a flurry of texts, all wondering where I'd gone and why I left like that. I threw my phone at the dash in a rage, furious at her nonchalant attitude. My brother and his wife were surprised to see me, especially dressed in just a pair of boxers, but told me I could stay as long as I needed. Chris lent me some clothes and asked me what happened. I told him Lynn and I had a fight, but I didn't get into any details. I didn't want him to think I was overreacting, leaving my wife over a prank, even if it was a strange one. Hadn't I encouraged her for years to lighten up instead of being so serious all the time? I had wanted her to relax and loosen up, but this was definitely not what I had in mind. Me neither, bro. Me neither. That's all I'm saying. I tried to sleep on their sofa, but my brain wouldn't let me sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lynn's face staring at me from inside the closet. Knowing she'd been there with me the entire time made my skin crawl. She never left the fucking bathroom at all. Instead, she slipped inside the closet and slammed the bathroom door shut to fool me. The mere thought of going back home gave me anxiety. I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Chris ended up giving me a sleeping pill so I was able to get a little bit of rest. My sleep was filled with terrible dreams, all of Lynn's smiling face. I woke up Just as the sun started to rise, my sore body ached from the sofa, and I felt drained. I knew I'd have to call Lynn at some point, but I didn't know what to say to her. I wouldn't be going home unless she gave me her word she'd never do any more creepy shit. I mean, I get that in writing too, bro. I get a lawyer. I get anything under the sun. I mean, I would just divorce her at this point. I mean, fuck that, bro. I don't know how you recover from that. I really don't. I have no clue. No fucking clue. I just wanted my wife back. Her normal, serious self never looked so good to me. I was contemplating calling her and telling her that. When that familiar feeling came over me, I was being watched. I was staring at the ceiling, my heart in my throat. I didn't want to look away, but the longer I ignored the feeling, the worse it got. My eyes drifted away from the ceiling, almost on their own. Her face was pressed up against the window beside the couch, staring down at me with the same gaping smile. Drool dribbled down her lips, leaving 2 long streaks down the glass. I didn't know how long she'd been there, but something told me she had been there for a while, possibly all night. I didn't bother screaming, though I was angered. I mean, that's fucked up, bro. Because not only, I mean, you're messing with the brother's house now, not just your husband's. Like, that's awesome. Get this chick out of here, bro. That's all I'm saying. I didn't bother screaming, though I was afraid anger trumped any fear I felt at that moment. I jumped up from the couch and pounded my palm against the glass. Lynn, are you crazy? What the hell is wrong with you? Just go home, I shouted. She didn't even move, and her ghastly expression never changed. If anything, her smile only grew, as if she had never been more elated. I could hear Chris and his wife moving her upstairs, as if Lynn could hear them from her place outside. Her head twitched slightly in their direction. She began to close her mouth slowly. Chris called my name from upstairs, obviously concerned. I turned to see him and his wife Rebecca hurrying down the steps. When I turned back to the window, Lynn was gone. The only sign that she had been there was the 2 streaks of drool, still dripping down the glass. I tried explaining to Chris and Rebecca about waking up to seeing Lynn watching me through the window. They were skeptical. Who wouldn't be? Chris and I went outside to the spot in front of the window, but there were no footprints in the dirt. Just a slight indent. Animal probably, Chris guessed. I didn't argue. He and Rebecca assumed I dreamt the entire episode, but they didn't understand, and I was too tired to explain it to them. I called out of work that day and turned my cell phone off. I didn't want to face Lynn. Just talking to her was too much for me at that point. I really believed something was irreversibly wrong with her, that no matter what promises she made, we'd never be the same again. The thought saddened me to my core. I cried most of the morning. By noon, I figured I was ready to confront her, give her one last chance to explain herself. I could at least give her that after 6 years. I turned my phone on and saw the dozens of texts she sent, all from a seemingly concerned wife. Can we talk? I love you. Please call me. I'm really worried. Can you answer? Just come home. Those were the texts that Lynn sent. All texts telling me she loved me and she wanted me home. How worried she was. Not a damn one addressing the crazy shit she pulled. Like she hadn't been acting like a character from a Stephen King book. Even her texts were different. She normally texted novels just to tell me to pick up a loaf of bread. You'd think she'd have more to say after her bizarre shenanigans. I knew it probably seems childish to some of you who are miles away from this situation, but if you saw the way Lynn had looked at me, how she scampered away on all fours like some wild animal, grinning at me from inside the closet like a lunatic, then I think you would find my reaction was warranted. I ended up staying with Chris and Rebecca for another night. I didn't wake up yesterday until afternoon, and thankfully I didn't see Lynn's face watching me through the window. I don't want to pry because it's not my place, but is this fight something that can be mended? Rebecca asked. She made us both a sandwich for lunch, and I knew she wanted to breach the subject without seeming too nosy. I don't know, She's just like a different person, I said, choosing my words carefully. I still wasn't ready for her or Chris to know the full extent of the batshit craziness I had been dealing with. People change, Ben, but she's still the same woman you married. Maybe you both just need to talk through your issues, whatever's going on. I'm sure it can be fixed, she said, ever the peacemaker. I think it's beyond that now. I don't think talking would help. I just don't trust her, I said. The words stung in my heart. I missed and loved my wife, but how could I live with someone like that? Living in constant fear didn't sound too appealing. Lynn loves you. She has to be absolutely crushed, she said. I don't know about that, I responded. Well, she certainly seemed like that to me. I had never seen her so upset, very much unlike the Lynn I know, Rebecca said, shaking her head sadly. It took me a full minute for her words to really sink in, and when they did, I felt dread worming its way through my skin. Wait, what do you mean? You saw her? You saw Lynn? I asked. Rebecca nodded casually as if the fact wasn't nightmare fuel. Maybe for her it wasn't. She stopped by this morning just after Chris left for work, she said, cleaning the plates from the table. I didn't see her car though. Maybe she took an Uber or something. Beck, what did she say? Did she come inside? I asked, sweat starting to break on my forehead. I began looking around, examining corners as though a predator lurked behind them. No, she just asked if you were awake yet, and I said you weren't. I asked if she wanted me to wake you, but she had said no. Just said to let you sleep, she said as she washed the dishes. That's all. She didn't say anything else, I responded. That's all. She didn't say anything else, I asked. No. She looked awful, though, like she hadn't slept in days. I think you should call her. I got her from the table and thanked Rebecca for lunch. I felt a little better at the knowledge that at least she hadn't come inside. Still, I needed to double check that the doors were locked. I sat for a while trying to figure out what to do next. I didn't want to go home, but I felt that I owed it to Lynn to help her if I could. Hadn't I sworn an oath to love and honor her through sickness and in health? Clearly, she was very sick. If she was sick, which I truly believe she was, I had to try and get her the help she needed. But I didn't even know where to start. I didn't want to call the police, and besides, what the hell was I going to tell them? That my wife was peeking at me? That she was being creepy? As bizarre as she'd been, she hadn't committed any crime. Not yet, anyway. The police would have probably said I was overreacting, but this wasn't some prank. It felt wrong, dangerous even, like something sinister lurked behind her smile. I knew as her husband I was well within my rights to have her committed, but what if she simply acted normal in their presence? She'd obviously been able to fool Rebecca into thinking she was just a concerned wife. As long as the doctors didn't find her a danger to herself or others, they'd have no choice but to release her after 72 hours. I felt lost and overwhelmed. I mean, get a divorce, bro. Do something. You have to do something. Anyways, so I did what any husband in my position would do. I called her mother. I didn't want to, believe me. Her mother, Marianne, and I were never on the best of terms. We never fought or anything like that. She just wasn't a warm person and wasn't really easy to get along with. She hardly ever smiled, and when she did, only her lips would move into a thin-lipped smile, leaving her eyes as blank as before. She gave off this aura that felt like she was permanently on the offensive. I'd only met her twice, and both times were for short visits. I got the impression she didn't approve of me of her daughter. I got the impression she didn't approve of me for her daughter. Lynn always ushered us out quickly, as she didn't want me to feel uncomfortable, which I was grateful for. Being in her mother's company felt almost unbearable, like walking on glass. I was glad when we moved 3 states away so we didn't have to see her often. I was happy to avoid the woman, but I needed some help. I really didn't want to talk to her at all, but I had to talk to someone, and someone who knew Lynn better than I did. So, I grit my teeth and did what I had to do. Yes, she answered, already sounding irritated. Marianne, it's me, Ben. Do you have a minute to talk? I asked. I'm in the middle of writing some checks, but if you insist, I suppose I could spare a moment. What is it that you want to discuss, Benjamin? She said. It's about Lynn. She's been acting strange, and I was wondering if you had any idea whether there was something, and I was quickly interrupted by her. It's a bit difficult to follow your rambling, Benjamin. What is it that you want from me? She asked. I could almost see her standing there in her thin sweater and slacks, tapping her fingernails impatiently on the table. I wanted to know if you'd ever noticed any odd behavior or possibly any mental health issues, I asked. There was a long, uncomfortable pause that I couldn't tell was because she was just thinking or something else. Finally, after a few seconds, she spoke. I'm not sure if this is one of your jokes, Benjamin, but if so, I don't find the humor in it. Now, I do have business to attend to, so if you don't mind, she said, but I cut her off before she could get rid of me. Marianne, it's not a joke. Marianne, it's not a joke. I'm sincerely concerned about Lynn's mental health. Her behavior has been very erratic lately. I'm very worried about her, and I figured as her mother, you would be as well. If you're truly concerned, then I suggest you get the health professionals involved. I don't know what you expect of me, she snapped. I could tell she was seconds away from hanging up, and for some reason I was desperate not to let her. I had the feeling she knew more than she was letting on. Please, if not for me, do it for Lynn. I heard a faint, shaky intake of breath, as if she was trying to hold her steely persona together but failing. Marianne, what's wrong? I started. Benjamin, I don't know what to tell you. My only advice would be to seek professional help. Do not call here again. Goodbye. I tried to call out to her, but she hung up. I tried to wrap my head around the call and her refusal to help me. Even if she didn't like me, why wouldn't she want to help her own daughter? I couldn't understand that. I tried to replay the conversation, desperate to find something I missed. After a while, I almost gave up, until I remembered her last words to me. Seek professional help. She said those words with a bit of urgency. I could have just been grasping at straws, but no. I was sure her voice had changed, ever so slightly when she said that, as if they were important. What had she meant? I assumed she had been referring to medical professionals, but maybe she was referring to someone else. Someone that she didn't, for some reason, feel comfortable saying directly. Or who knows, maybe I was just desperate. I waited for Chris to get home, and after a long, exhausting conversation with him and Rebecca, I convinced them that Lynn truly needed psychiatric help. I didn't tell them everything. I wasn't prepared to go into it yet, but I told them about our last encounter, how she'd hidden in the bathroom peeking at me from the closet. They were obviously shocked, but thankfully they believed me. They too just wanted to help her. Still, they didn't think it was all that serious. Weird, maybe, but not dangerous. They just kept saying that Lynn had to be playing some kind of weird joke. Maybe for YouTube, Rebecca offered, if only half-heartedly. Chris didn't think we should involve the police just yet. He offered instead to go with me, and I readily accepted. He reasoned that I calmly talked to her, trying to coax her into going willingly was the best course. I agreed to do it his way. At least I wouldn't be going into the house alone. We drove over this morning, just after breakfast. There was no way I was going at night. When we pulled into the driveway, my stomach began doing somersaults. Her car wasn't there, but I still didn't let my guard down. The front door was ajar, and for a split second I thought we'd see her eyes staring through the gap. I was shaking and starting to sweat. Chris, however, was fine. He waited for me to open the door, his hands in his pockets like he was going through a fucking stroll through the park. I envied his ignorance. I pushed the door open and was immediately hit with the stench of rot. Chris smelled it too, and he walked in the house with me, with his nose scrunched up. "What do you guys use to clean the floors around here?" "Shit," Chris mumbled. "Shut up," I said, my eyes darting around for any signs of Lynn. The house was dead quiet and dark despite being 10 in the morning. All the curtains were closed, refusing to allow any sunlight inside. If I hadn't left it just 2 days prior, I'd have thought the house had to be abandoned. We moved through each room, carefully checking any places she might be, occasionally calling her name. "Why the fuck are you looking under the couch?" Chris asked eventually. "Aren't we looking for your wife?" He was looking at me like I was a moron. "Let's just go upstairs," I whispered. He shook his head but followed me up the stairs to check the bathroom and spare bedroom. On the way up, my shoes crunched over pieces of glass that looked to be littered over a few steps. I noticed that one of Lynn and my wedding portraits that hung on the wall along the staircase had been smashed. The frame hung crookedly, all the glass removed. I stared at the picture, a lump forming in my throat. We had taken the photo just after leaving the church, after saying our vows. She looked so beautiful in her white gown. I looked at Lynn's beautiful face. I never dreamt her face would ever be a source of terror for me. We climbed the rest of the steps and checked the spare bedroom, but it looked completely untouched. By the way, I'm not giving my reaction right now, guys, because I'm actually locked in. I'm really locked into this story. I was hesitant to go into the bathroom, my fear from that night coming back to me all at once. Chris noticed and offered to go in by himself, but I couldn't let him do that, so we walked in together, checking the closet and the shower. The bathroom looked as if it hadn't been touched since the night I left. "I don't think she's here, Ben. Why don't you pack some clothes and we'll try coming back tomorrow or something," Chris said. I nodded and went into our bedroom, shoved some clothes into a duffel bag. When I checked inside our closet, I came across the source of the smell and gagged. Chris took one look and lost all color in his face. He had to go stand by the stairs to get away from the sight and the smell. I gazed down in shock at what was laying inside my bedroom closet. Soaking into the rug were at least a dozen eyeballs, all carefully laid out in pairs. Some were as large as a quarter, while others were tiny as a marble. I stared down at the eyes she had collected from small animals. I wondered how she had gotten them, and I shuddered at the thought. "Man, I thought I had it bad with Becca's shoe addiction, but fuck me, your wife's in here collecting eyeballs," Chris said, gagging. "Ben, I think we should go," he called from the hall. "I'm getting nauseous." "All right." I grabbed my duffel and shut the closet door on my nightmare. I stepped out into the hall, took a deep breath. I could taste the rot on my tongue, and I couldn't help but gag. "Who the fuck lines up eyeballs in their closet like that?" Chris mumbled. "I tried to tell you she needed help," I said. "She doesn't need help, Ben. She needs a fucking exorcist," he said. "You coming or what? I can't stand the smell any longer." His words died in his throat. His eyes grew wide with fear. I didn't ask him why. I could feel it. Someone was watching me, and I didn't think it was the eyes in the closet. I turned around, my eyes slowly scanning the bedroom. "Christ," I whispered, as I finally saw what we'd missed. Under the bed, curled on her side, watching us with the excitement of a kid on Christmas morning, was my wife. She held her hands together just under her chin, and they were shaking eagerly. Now that she had been found, I could hear the quiet noises she was making, a sort of hiccuping sound in her throat, as if the excitement was just too much for her. It was unnerving to say the least. Wide eyes and that same huge smile. Everything in me told me to run, but I forced it away. This was my wife. No matter how twisted, she was still the woman I married. I had to help her. "Lynn," I said softly. She didn't respond, but her head bobbed back and forth in two quick little movements. "Baby, I just want to help, okay? Can you let me do that?" I asked. I had even taken a single step forward, almost as if I was approaching a dangerous animal. "I love you, Lynn," I said, softly taking another step closer. She let a tiny moan escape her wide mouth, and I had to resist the urge to run. Her shoulders were starting to quiver, and her eyes grew as large as saucers. I crunched down so I could see her better and immediately saw the blood. Her hands were covered in it. They trembled the closer I got, as if she was barely able to contain herself. "Lynn, are you hurt?" "You're bleeding," I said. She bobbed her head again, her bloody fingers moving up and down as if she's playing an invisible piano. They occasionally grazed her chin, leaving smears of blood on her skin. I wanted to recoil in disgust. The smell that was coming off of her was revolting. I could feel the vomit trying to climb up my throat. Her lips were dry and stretched thin, blood seeping between the cracks. I scooted closer and reached out to her. The excited hiccuping sounds got louder and her hands shook, fingers flexing. It was then that I could see the blood oozing from in between her fingers. "Oh my God, Lynn, you're bleeding," I said. Instinctively, I reached out to take her hand, but before I could even touch her, her hand sprang out towards me. A sharp pain shot through my arm, and I fell back on my ass. My arm burned, and I could see the blood dripping down to the carpet. I looked back at her in shock and saw her grinning, her fingers clutching a large shard of glass. "You all right in there?" Chris asked from behind me. I turned my head slightly and nodded to him, cradling my arm into my chest. When I turned back to face Lynn, I saw that her focus shifted. She wasn't looking at me anymore, and she wasn't smiling anymore either. She was staring past me, her eyes glaring at Chris the way a hungry lion might stare at an antelope. Her mouth was still hanging open, but it was twisted into a snarl. I got to my feet and began walking backwards to the hall, afraid to take my eyes off her. "Are you bleeding?" Chris asked. The moment the words left his mouth, Lynn started fast scooting out from under the bed, the glass still in her fist. "Chris, run, go," I yelled. He must have been too afraid to move because a second later I felt my back bump into him. He was still standing at the top of the stairs, staring at the horror that was my wife. Lynn had crawled completely out from under the bed and stood in the bedroom doorway, her face twisted in rage. Her whole body was visibly tense. Blood ran down her fingers and onto the floor. "Jesus, Lynn," Chris said. "You playing hide and seek?" I reached back and pushed him towards the steps. "Move your ass, Chris," I said. Lynn bobbed her head in fast, sharp motions and began to grin, stretching her mouth open wider and wider so that her chin seemed to touch her chest. I heard Chris mutter a prayer, and then he was running down the stairs. I stood at the top of the steps, stuck between the love for a woman who clearly needed serious help and self-preservation. "I only want to help," I said, choking back tears. Her eyes focused on me once again as she slowly lifted the glass, holding it out in front of her. And then she started sprinting towards me, grinning with utter excitement. Thankfully, my body took over and I flew down the stairs, skipping 2 or 3 at a time. I made it to the front door before I felt her leap onto my back, wrapping her arms around my neck, her open mouth next to my ear so that I could hear those terrible hiccuping sounds. I shook her off me, knocking her to the floor. I felt a searing pain in my back as she went, but I tore open the front door and bolted to the car. Chris was standing in the front yard, talking on the phone with the police. I didn't say a word. I just ran to my car and jumped in. Chris took the hint and followed me, still on the line with 911. I watched the rearview mirror, sure I'd see her there running after us, but I never did. I went straight to the ER and got 11 stitches in my arm and 3 on my back. The police asked a lot of questions and went back to the house to do a search, but of course, Lynn wasn't there. They advised me to stay with a relative for a while and to file a restraining order. They advised I stay with a friend or a relative while I filed a restraining order so I could They advised me to stay with a friend or relative for a while and to file a restraining order. They advised me to stay with a friend or a relative for a while and to file a restraining order as soon as I could, but none of the things would matter. Somehow I just knew. I dropped Chris off at home and went to a motel an hour away. I wanted to put as much distance between me and Lynn as I could. This is where I've been the last 4 hours, and I thought maybe the police would find her. Maybe they'd get her the help she needs. But now I don't think so. Because 40 minutes ago I got a text from an unknown. But now I don't think so. Because 40 minutes ago I got a text from an unknown number. Just three words. I found you. And a picture attached. The picture was dark, grainy, but I instantly knew what it was. There was no mistaking my wife's eye. I started typing this out immediately after. I don't know what to do. I'm alone and scared, and I can't help but feel that I'm being watched. This was fire. This was a 10 out of 10. Fucking fire. Yeah, man, I don't know if they made a movie or a show or something off of this yet, maybe like on Shudder or something, but this was insane. I actually like this a lot. This was better than the other one that I read. And again, I don't know if these are real. I know some are, some do come from a place of truth, but nah, this was fucking awesome, bro. Yeah, man. I mean, I'll be back with Reddit stories more in the future. Hopefully Marvelous will be on and we can read them together and we can both react and y'all can get our reactions. But anyways, let me know what you thought about this episode of Slashers and Sync and if you want more Reddit stories. Anyways, I'll talk to y'all guys next time.